I'm only hearing straw men. I'm hearing that there's wide agreement that God, if the universe is not to have a purpose, then it must mean that God doesn't exist. But I think the universe doesn't have a purpose, not because I think God doesn't exist, but because I look at the universe and conclude that the universe doesn't have a purpose. It's nothing to do with whether God exists or not. We can go on to discuss that as well, but it's not. It's simply wrong to say that we've agreed that the universe will have a purpose if God exists. And I've also heard it said that it's not possible to live a fulfilling life without a freedom-bestowing God. Well, I think that's a terrible mistake. There are lots of us who live extremely fulfilling lives with a wonderfully purposeful experience, in which we do our own purposes, but that doesn't mean the universe has a purpose, and it doesn't mean that there's a freedom-bestowing God. I've heard it's a bizarre figment, that things seem to have a purpose, that there is function and order in the world. I don't think it's a bizarre figment at all. I think we've amply demonstrated that it's quite possible to have order and pattern and complexity in the world without there being a destination and without there being a top-down designer. And we've heard from Rabbi Wolpe that people live their lives by things other than science. And rightly so, of course they do. But that doesn't mean that we can find in that other than science the definition of God. That's the God of the gaps. I mean, I could just as easily say the great spaghetti monster therefore exists because you live your life by more than science. The search for the purpose in life is a bit like the search for the secret of life itself, which theology thought it had a stranglehold on for many centuries. And then as science began to investigate, first of all, it fell back to saying, well, yes, there's special chemicals for life, but then they synthesized urea, and that argument went out the window. So then they said, well, there's going to be special protoplasm. There's something mystical and irreducible in living organisms that is not present in non-living. And then we found that a very simple chemical called DNA actually explained everything we needed to explain. And then we said, well, the genetic code is going to be very special. It's going to have unusual features that we will never be able to understand, but it turned out to be a simple linear digital recombination. And then we found that the genetic code was a frozen accident. And then we looked for special human genes, and we didn't find them. We found we've got the same 21,000 genes as a mouse. We just use them in a different pattern and a different order. So I think the search for a purpose in life is like the search for the secret of life. It's simply retreating. They're retreating step after step to try and find it in physics, to try and find it in the Big Bang, to try and find it in the initial conditions of the universe. Anywhere where at the moment we can't understand something. But to say that the purpose of life is not to understand something doesn't seem to me to be a very satisfying answer.
David, please.
I couldn't agree more. It's not a satisfying answer to say that the purpose of life is what we don't understand. But it does seem to me that in some sense what all of this comes down to is what you believe about yourself. If you think you are an accident of ancient chemistry and you believe that you are entirely composed of matter and there is nothing intangible about you and there is nothing spiritual about you, nothing ineffable about you, nothing that isn't ultimately material, then you must believe that the universe as a whole has no purpose, because we know that the universe is composed of things that are purposeful and seem to be purposeless, all of that. But what about you? Does the universe speak to you on some level? And here, as much as you might think that someone can answer this reductively, that someone can say, well, look, it's all about your DNA, and it's all about the way in which the stardust eventually, by a long process that we call evolution, whether it's in physics as an evolution or in biology, resulted in you, if that's your explanation for what you are, then yeah, the universe did not certainly intend to create you. It didn't intend anything, and it has no purpose. But you might cling to the thought, not that human beings are the only special creation in the universe, and there might not be a great proliferation of life elsewhere, but that there is something special about you. That when you look in the eyes of somebody you love, you see more than something that is just a collocation of atoms, that is here for a brief crack of light between two darknesses. You might actually have a poetic and spiritual understanding of what it means to be a human being, and you might be unwilling to have that robbed by somebody who sees you in reductive and material terms. You might think that you have a relationship with God that you can't put on a blackboard, that you can't explain, that you can't account for, but that is real, just like the love that you feel for the people in your life who are dear to you. And what I guess I'm saying to you, and maybe what this divide is really about, is whether you think the universe is a mystery or a puzzle. If you think it's a puzzle, then you think it's susceptible to rational explanation, and one day we'll figure it out if we're only smart enough and we try hard enough and we're not pathetically lazy, as we religious people were called a moment ago. But let me tell you what we lazy people think. We think it's a mystery. We think we'll never figure it out. We think it's about God.
Michael Shermer.
Well, I think we need to clarify a couple of words here. When we talk about does the universe have a purpose, obviously not. The universe is mostly just stars and planets and comets and other stuff. But just take stars, for example. There's hundreds of billions of them in our galaxy. There's hundreds of billions of galaxies. Most of the universe is just stars. All they're doing is converting hydrogen into helium under great pressure and heat. That's it. They're not sitting there thinking, I got to give Michael Shermer some purpose here because, you know, if I don't, he's going to kill himself or something. No. They're just converting hydrogen into helium. Gentlemen, we're in agreement on this. You know this is true. What you're arguing is that because I can't think of any purpose outside of stars burning hydrogen into helium, therefore there has to be a God. We're not debating whether there's a God or not. Don't you think, even if there isn't a God, that you should find some purpose? This is in a way a kind of argument from ignorance. Because there is no answer, therefore there must be a God. Or the argument from personal incredulity. Because I can't think of an answer, therefore there has to be a God. So what they're arguing is that because I can't think of a purpose outside of God, therefore there must be a God. Gentlemen, maybe there's a God, maybe there's not. Either way, don't you think you ought to roll up your sleeves and see if you can figure out some useful things to do to give yourself purpose outside of God? Don't you think that's worthwhile? I used to be on this side. I went to Pepperdine University. It's a Church of Christ school. I was a born-again evangelical Christian for 7 years. I believed that argument until I gave it a little thought and thought, wait a minute. Shouldn't I be doing these nice things for other people? Shouldn't I be finding love and commitment to somebody, a meaningful career, helping my social community and being involved in politics, trying to transcend myself and do something outside of myself? Shouldn't I be doing those things anyway? So here's my challenge for you, gentlemen. Let's just do a thought experiment here for just a moment. Just pretend there is no God. Did you just lose your purpose in life? Don't you think you should be doing these good things anyway? If it turns out there is no God, gentlemen, really, would you stop doing the things you're doing? Would you stop being loving to your spouses? Would you quit being nice to other people? Would you rape, pillage, and steal? No, I don't think so. I think you're doing this anyway, even if there is no God. So just try it on. Just try it on for just an hour here. Try on the atheist cap. Just see how it feels. Nothing will change. You'll still have meaning and purpose in life. Thank you.
Douglas, it's your turn. No? The three of you have... Please.
Excuse me for that. Matt Ridley, who spoke earliest, spoke of pattern versus purpose and suggested that what we have demonstrated is pattern, but what we can't observe is purpose. There's function as a function of pattern, but still no purpose towards which these things are moving. And then he spoke of progress. We are experiencing progress. Progress in our scientific understanding of the world and in our use of this understanding in developing technology that helps us make our way in the world. But what is this idea of progress if it's not a concept of value? Something that is ultimately of some good value. What makes this a point of progress unless it's just simply change, movement from one state to another? It has to be progress only on the condition that the movement is towards something better. And the idea of better imports the notion of value. But it seems to me that his conception of pattern without purpose leaves no room for value. He says we do not agree that life has purpose if there is a God, but he didn't give us an argument that life does not have purpose even if God exists. So I'm not sure why he would assert that without any support if that's what he believes. He says that it's been amply demonstrated that it's possible for all of the patterns that we see in the world to be produced from the bottom up. Well, that's a lot different than saying that we know that it's true. I'm not sure we know that it's possible. He hasn't demonstrated that. He's just saying we do know that it's possible. And I'm saying we don't know that it's possible, but even if we did know it's possible, that wouldn't tell us that's what we should believe, because something else might also be possible, namely a top-down explanation, which is actually a better explanation, and that's what we've been arguing. So it's not good enough to say this is possible. Now, Michael Shermer has said that it's obvious that the universe has no purpose, that all that stars do is convert hydrogen, convert hydrogen into helium. But let's put it this way, if stars weren't doing that sort of thing, you and I wouldn't exist. And so it does matter whether these things do exist, these stars, and have the properties they do, and whether the laws of nature are as they are. Turning to Richard Dawkins, I was really surprised to hear him speak of the horseflies and the lobsters, picking the really easy, cherry-picking the really easy cases of medieval belief as to why these things exist. And, it's good for a laugh, but I think people who believe that the universe has a purpose are bound to have the last laugh when responding to any naturalist who says, everything is merely apparent design. We're not talking about horseflies and lobsters. We're talking about the whole kit and caboodle, and he wants to say none of it is purposeful. Thank you.